You are the power of this cosmos. You are pure intelligence. You are unspeakable beauty. You are in perfect harmony with the entire cosmos. Stars and unknown stars, sun and moon, air and light, the beautiful plant kingdom of Mother Nature, the waters. This is your context. Male-female collaboration in same-sex or opposite-sex intimacy, that power is yours. And you're allowed to have that.
Well, welcome everybody. I want to welcome you to the Heart of Yoga podcast, and my friend Sriram, who is residing in Germany right now, a long-time student of Desikachar. We shared our teacher together. We are Guru brothers. And welcome, Sriram. I'm really delighted to meet you in this manner. We met, was it 2 years ago in New York City? And you came over for the memorial of Desikachar, who died quite recently. And the gathering there was so grateful to have your presence there for many reasons. Just the obvious one is that you are a native of South India. You were born into that culture that our teachers Desikachar and Krishnamacharya are in. So you were already there. We migrated there and tried to understand it. When I think of myself as a 20-year-old coming into Madras for the first time and having no clue of the society that I was entering, no language. And it was, it was like entering a big puzzle. It took a lot to work out, and maybe I worked out this much of it over my lifetime. But it's intriguing for me that you are of that society and that you became a very close friend and student of Desikachar. And you had the advantage, you might say, of already being up to speed with the culture that you were born into. I hope you understand what I'm saying here, that you as a native indigenous person of South India, you had this particular, you hit the tarmac running. you knew the society. So could we go right back to your very early life? I would like to know the family that you were born into. What was your childhood like running around South India? Could we go back to the beginning and you just sort of outline a few steps on the way for us? What was your early life about?
Well, I was born into a South Indian village, sort of what they call Shaiva Brahmin family, as the last of 5 children in a very tiny village near this very pompous and ancient city of Tanjavur, what they call Tanjore. It's one of the must-sees in the South Indian tourist maps. It's still got one of the most amazing temples of India. And when I grew up in Madras, in the city of Madras, I went to school there. I went to an English medium school, which meant in those days a Catholic school. So, but I was born to a family, as I said, a Brahmin family, which meant that there were a lot of rituals and traditional rules governing our day-to-day life. But my father, as well as both my grandfathers, weren't into the line of academics and scholarship in the sense of a traditional Brahmin. So they were into modern lives and modern professions. And in as much my contact with the Indian tradition was not, let us say, like it would have been for somebody like Desikachar, who was born into a family where they were all scholars and priestly, met people with priestly knowledge. But what happened? So it was much less my grandparents or my father, but the women in my family were all singing, and they were singing classical South Indian music. And you see, classical South Indian music, it's a very complex, very beautiful music, and the texts, the songs which are sung, they're all texts which are not just religious; they're very philosophical.
Yeah.
Like they question something like, how can one get into moksha, meaning freedom, spiritual freedom, without understanding nada and prana, meaning understanding the breath and the sound.
Right.
So this is an example of the type of text you are dealing with. And of course, the other texts which were dealing with subjects like, who is the Devi, the divine goddess,
Yeah.
and she's got these two beautiful eyes, the sun and the moon. They are the morning and the evening, but then she's got the third eye, which is the dawn, the dusk, which is so beautiful, and it's ever there. So I mean, this is just one of sort of traditional songs which you sing, which I have been hearing at home without really, not as a kid, not understanding the language and the text in depth, but still having a stunning melody, a stunning piece of music, very complex, which was somehow, I knew, embedded with the knowledge and wisdom and whatever. So it grew very close to my heart. So I would say my spiritual inclination were in the context of the Indian music, the temples where the gods appeared as beautiful sculptures, not as somebody who is promising you some help or somebody who is going to punish you if you did something wrong, but as beautiful sculptures which are pieces of art. So I started to enjoy, in some sense, have a deep relationship with the spirituality of India. And that was enhanced by the fact that I was a very sick child. I mean, I had every imaginable sickness, which a little kid in India, South India, coming from a sort of lower middle class family, not starving, but having enough to eat, but still just sort of, surviving. And that sort of a family, so had all types of sicknesses, and doctors couldn't help, and traditional medicine didn't help, modern medicine didn't help, and so I was left so to the help of my mother and grandmother, who would say, pray, keep repeating this mantra and do this, and so this became some sort of a self-help, where I knew without it I would die or I would sort of not exist. So it became an imperative for me, these things, spiritual things from different sides, they became imperatives in my young life.
Right.
But then on the other hand, I had this Catholic school where the nuns in my, my elementary school, and later the brothers and fathers, all in their cassocks and uniforms, they were on the one hand scary pictures, and on the other hand, they presented to me a world which was modern, English-based, and which sort of full of hope and, a promise of a bright future, etc. So I was really torn between these two worlds, the one at home and one in school. So I grew up with all this very South Indian music, very South Indian language, very South Indian gods and cultures and flavors. And on the other hand, love for English literature, love for modern life and liberal thinking, modern thinking, etc. And so I grew up in this environment, and I was not inclined to sports. So I was at home and interested more in things. So I really didn't get more into sort of things which had some relationship to some sort of a self-inquiry. and so I was never given to take to sports. So I stayed with studying, reading, and dreaming. So this became my childhood.
Right.
The first 15 years.
Did this divide between what was Catholicism, Christianity, and what is your mother and grandmother's beautiful Hindu Vedic background, did that ever come to a point of serious conflict for you as a young person? Was there a confusion?
So that's something which I regret, that I never really, as a youngster, went into this conflict and tried to battle the conflict, because I didn't try to battle it. I just tried to juggle with it, to sort of, to somehow handle it. And going to school was always almost like a mini trauma. And then, and on the other hand, I started to, I mean, my love for some of the things I learned in the school was also there. And so I really didn't, but it was a deadly struggle. It was internally tore me. It did tear me. And it was coupled sometime by the fact that on the one hand, maybe at home, they were too strict or too traditional. On the other hand, school was strict in a more brutalizing way. It was strict and it was very tough too. But I always had my own world of music and dream and whatever, gods and whatever, which I could flee, in which I could sort of escape. So I found this niche and therefore didn't really try to fight against this conflict.
But my experience in Madras is that the culture of Veda really seemed to receive the Christianity into its own, sort of absorbed it into its own sort of cultural context. I believe that one of Christ's disciples, was it Thomas? He ended up in India, in South India, and there's
exactly
way back. And there seemed to be, when I visited the churches of South India, they seemed to be like Hindu temples to me, where Christ was the deity, and they put the flowers around the Christ, and it seemed to just have a absorption into that culture that didn't they didn't make a problem around it, like some sort of like tribalism of opposition, or cultures in opposition to each other. At least that was my sense of it.
Yeah, I believe you.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting, in my school, there was a long corridor, and at the end of the corridor there was a picture of Mary, and somewhere around the area of her heart, what we would say the heart, in yoga, anahata, whatever. There was this glow and something, like a. I'm sorry, it was not Mary. It was Jesus. A picture of Jesus. There was along this, at the end of this corridor, there was a picture of Jesus, and there where his heart is, what we call anahata chakra, there was this glow, and there was a sort of divine thing there. And you see, we have a very similar picture which was hanging in my own house. It was of Hanuman, the sort of the monkey god of Ramayana. Hanuman and a chain, and here, Rama and Sita sort of hanging as his sort of inspiration, So I mean, so there were parallels. There were sort of things where I felt at home. I mean, see, Christianity and Catholicism was a reality around me. So it was not, in that sense, I wasn't torn apart, and I had lots of great Christian friends who would come to my house, or I would go to their house and spend time. And so but personally, it was ultimately, it was not a conflict between the Catholic school and the Indian tradition, but it was a conflict between old and new, between seeking a spiritual essence, or of trying to find a meaning of what is really, what you really want in life, and then doing things, which are only oriented towards, learning, getting into a profession, making money, and making sure you get your pension or whatever, so to say, so that you can die peacefully. So this sort of, this was a dichotomy actually.
Would have represented the sort of modern Western idealisms going to that Catholic school, that you were attracted to those ideas or intimidated by those, the modernism that was symbolized by the Western Christian school.
As long as I was there, I didn't feel, I didn't think in a political or social or, universal sense about it. It was a personal problem. Right. It was more when I started to deal with, as a post-teenager with 18 or 19, I went into a regular track. I left school. I mean, I met a few people. There was this Ramakrishna Mutt. You might know it in Mylapore near the temple. There is this Ramakrishna Mutt, which has got a very huge library and a huge bookshop too. And I used to visit it often because I used to read books there, and from Shankara, etc. Because I had a third conflict going with me. One was, of course, is a family, a traditional South Indian family, and then the school. The third was I myself had an urge to become some sort of a monk or a recluse and move away from society. And as a South, and every Indian, but even more so for a South Indian, Varanasi is some sort of a big destination, And for a South Indian who's never crossed the borders of Tamil Nadu or not traveled 200 kilometers away from Madras, for me, Varanasi was unimaginably far away. But still, there was this dream of going to Varanasi, living at the Ganges, and not possessing anything, etc. That was a dream. It's a dream of many people who speak spirituality. Do we lead a life connected to the world or sort of removed from the world? So I was going through this conflict very much. So Ramakrishna Mutt became some sort of a haven where I would go read books and get into another space. Sometimes I have discussions with some of the people who are working at the bookshops, etc. So that was also going in my life on the one hand. So I became interested in the intellectual part of Indian tradition on the one hand. And on the other hand, I was in an English school. Literature or English literature was one of my favorite subjects. I read a lot of literature. I read a lot of classical literature like Shakespeare. And then slowly, as I got out of college, my interest in English literature grew. And I entered an engineering college where I was very, very unhappy, because it's sort of, in India, if you come from a middle-class family, you either, at least in the 80s, 90s, you either become an engineer or a doctor. And if you can't become one of these two, you try to become an auditor or somebody who works in a bank or something. So this is what everybody wants to do. So, so I was one of the huge herds of sheep, and I went into this College of Engineering, got myself admitted, and after a year realized that I was totally out of place there. And I was only going to increase my conflicts in life. So that was the time when on the one hand, my spiritual inclinations took a larger hold on me. And I was thinking, yes, yoga and meditation and all this. And on the other hand, I got into a group of friends who were a big liberation for me, because they asked me to rethink about traditional values, about the role of woman, about the role of caste, about the role of injustice which has happened in India on the one hand, and friends who sort of pushed me into this line of thought, where I slowly started to liberate myself from traditional values, also traditional constrictions. And on the other hand, I had a strong contact through my friends who were all sort of inclined to me similarly. And we got together, we were smoking a lot of dope, and we had a lot of fun. We were going out, and we got into people like Robert Lang and David Cooper. I don't know if you might have read them too, because they were very famous in the 70s. and into a lot of English literature too. So, and then I slowly got into reading a lot of Marx, and so I suddenly, out of being a very having a conflict between a traditional Vedic home and a sort of a Catholic school, it became a very complicated, complex conflict with Marx and modern psychology, and Ivan Illich, who was saying stop schooling, and etc. And people like Shankara, who saying throw out all conventions and leave behind. And on the one hand, and another Shankara saying who is being represented in society as somebody who's sort of a very venerable traditional Hindu preacher. So there were all these conflicts going on within me, which is when I decided I really have to find a solution, because I was going mad within myself, emotionally, psychologically, etc. And so I was getting really torn. And I was meeting a few people. I got a little bit into this. There's a transcendental meditation. I met a few of the meditation teachers. I was not interested. And getting into, as an Indian, getting into something like Marx on the other one hand, and something like Shankara on the other hand, it's just two worlds which are too much apart.
Right.
And because of inclinations and political inclinations and language inclinations, some of my friends and I, we got together when we started a theater in Chennai, in Madras, where we started doing plays to sort of, and we were to sort of make an impact on society, to have some sort of a social relevance. And so we were doing modern theater, and some of my friends were having artist background, and they were in touch with the modern art circles in Madras. And Madras has still a very big circle, a very big group of modern painters and modern thinkers. And there were a lot of people from Kerala who were in Madras, who were great writers, modern writers. So suddenly I was connected with a lot of people who were not at all from my world, and it was very exciting. And so I was getting into Indian Charvaka system, not Shankara, which is very sort of orthodox and very theist, but Charvaka is the Indian atheism, old Indian atheism of, let's say, times of Patanjali or something.
Right.
And that was a time, and then I said, no, this is not my thing. I would like to delve more into somebody like Patanjali, which is more about psychology and spirituality and so on. So it was for me actually a nexus of, Marx and R.D. Lang and Shankara and Charvaka and tantric Devi worship, etc. So somehow that was a meeting point for me.
You covered the field. You had a full hand of many options.
Yeah.
It must have been confusing, exciting, but confusing, perhaps.
Very confusing and very exciting. And so there was it was a big collusion of ideas, and I was being thrown around, and I didn't know what my future was going to be. I only knew I don't want to be an engineer. I cannot continue to be in the theater because it's too much of madness out there, and too much of aggression out there, which I'm not made for.
Yeah.
And the world of spirituality, too many conventional people, and it's also not the right thing for me. So I was really lost. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Of course, indeed.
I'm surprised you didn't just become a holy man and wander off and catch a train up to Varanasi and just give it all away.
Yeah, probably. I think this is where the libido plays a very, very positive role.
I see.
You just want to do that. So,
right.
And of course, as I told you, starting with my grandmother and mother, and of course sisters who've been learning music at home, there have actually always been very strong influences in my life. And one of my very early friends, she was one of my, like a girlfriend, she was 20 years older to me, and I was a 20-year-old man, and she was 40, and she really pushed me out of traditional thinking, saying our gods. You have to question our society and caste and injustice and all this,
Right.
And so so there were a few other women who also shook me up quite a bit. And there was a young woman who was studying with Krishnamacharya, so I knew about him. And I didn't want to go to a traditional Brahmin scholar and learn. I had my reservations. I didn't know Krishnamacharya was such a fabulous liberal man.
Mm.
But then that was a time when I met Anjali, and that really sort of made a major difference to me, because suddenly I found here a Westerner who's got nothing to do with my culture, who looks grossly different, whose body language is so different, coming all the way here, a young woman, and living all alone and fending for her own survival, and learning Indian art.
Right.
And of course, it really, it amazed me. Because I was living in not very far away from Adyar, where the Theosophical Society has its headquarters, and there are and you do see some foreigners, some freaky Western men and women, with long hair, beards, or women with sort of locks, almost like dreadlocks, and wearing saris on cycles. And so you do see these very, very odd, figures on cycles or on foot in the 70s in that area. So it was not totally amazing, but here I was very amazed to see she was my neighbor. And so it also opened my mind to doing your own thing, being totally independent, doing your own thing, and that it's possible. I mean, if somebody can come all the way from a foreign country all alone as a woman too, and live in my midst, where I know my sisters can't go out and live on their own, it's just not possible.
Wow.
And so that did sort of open my eyes in a very different way. And for me, there was Indian art, at least interest for Indian art, and then Indian philosophy, interest for Indian philosophy and spirituality, and then the modern Western education, theater, literature, etc. So it became a very strong, meeting. Right. So which gave me courage to say, I can do my own thing. Why not?
Right. So somehow your meeting with Anjali, right? And I just want to slip in here. Anjali is your intimate partner, who you're now living with decades later in Germany who's was a wonderful dancer of South Indian classical music, to, what is it called, Bharatanatyam.
Bharatanatyam.
He is a wonderful dancer. So your link to her was somehow a catalyst for you to look further into this interest that had been sparked with Krishnamacharya.
Yeah, exactly. And I had a friend in my theater circle. I was into theater for about 3 years. We were running the most modern theater in Madras, and we were in the papers, and so it was a very major thing, and we had a lot of people. So a couple of people who were in the theater, they were studying with Desikachar. They knew Krishnamacharya. One of them, his entire family was studying with Krishnamacharya. So I heard of these people, and somehow I thought, I won't go to Krishnamacharya, but Desikachar, I can look him up, And since I was very, like I told you, there's a lady, this elderly friend I had. She introduced me to Jaykrishnamurti when I was 20, And she introduced me to Jaykrishnamurti, and I was associated. I mean, I had read a little bit and visited a few of his lectures in Madras. And so I didn't know about the connection between Desikachar and Jaykrishnamurti, but I just thought, okay, he's a modern man and it's no problem. And my friend said he's also studied engineering, so what's your problem? Just come on, and so on. So and he sort of told Desikachar, and Desikachar sort of gave me an appointment. I mean, I was given an appointment to go meet him. So I went there and met him. So it's how it happened that I said, yes, I'm going to take a step.
Tell us about this first meeting, and why did that result in a step? You said a first step. How did that happen? What was your impression of Desikachar?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I was glad he was not a traditional scholar with a beard with white hair, where I would have thought he's maybe too conservative for my taste.
Yeah.
But I also didn't expect to find a man who was in sort of, like a typical Madras urban style, a sort of what we used to call in the 70s a terry cotton pant and terry cotton shirt. This sort of polyester clothes, trousers, and a sort of a slack shirt. I didn't expect something like that. So, but I was pretty open and happy, and we had a conversation. See, for me, yoga meant. Not meant yoga. It was about understanding what is the mind, what are we doing, why are we here. So, and meditation I had been into, and I was practicing, and asanas I had got here and there, and I was practicing some asanas now and then, but it didn't interest me really. I was only interested in these questions. Right. But somehow I approached and spoke to him about my questions, about my deeper questions. He said, you study asanas and then we'll see, So he almost sort of, ignored all my deep spiritual questions in this first conversation I had with him for about half an hour. And then he called in his most senior assistant, out of his assistants, his most senior assistant. That was one Prabhakar, who was sort of a Primus student. And he said, Prabhakar, give classes to Sriram, and give twice a week. He'll come here and take classes. So, Desikachar said, okay, and every Saturday, I don't remember, once in a week, he'll be giving lectures and I should come, and Krishnamacharya will be giving lectures once in a week, I should also come. So I started going regularly to the lectures of Desikachar and Krishnamacharya, and 2 classes a week with Prabhakar. Asana classes, So I started studying, and suddenly I felt, my chest and the breath and, the stomach in a way I had not felt it in a different way, and not felt it at all before. So the breath started to do its magic on my body, and of course in sort of combination with the postures. So it was not just about doing Ardha Uttanasana or Utkatasana as a youngster, but really doing some deep breathing with holding of breath, etc. So it became it had an amazing vitalizing effect on me. So I was convinced that it's good. And slowly I also realized that through this practice of body and breath, it does something to the mind. So it's not about, you have to think. You have to enter a different space and come back with your mind to the same conflicts, and you look at the conflict differently.
Right. What happened to all your various life persuasions, or your confusing options that had been presented in your early life? Did they remain?
Yeah, I mean, they took new dimensions because first of all, I was slowly entering into a new world of yoga with Desikachar and Krishnamacharya too, because I mean, Krishnamacharya's classes, they were sort of very complex because he was speaking in very Sanskritized Tamil, and it was not easy to follow. It was all yoga philosophy, Yoga Sutra, and some other texts. And Desikachar himself was teaching a lot out of Yoga Sutra and about asana practice, pranayama practice. And then this regular practice that was doing a lot with me on the one hand. And on the other hand, I was starting to having entered into big conflicts with my very, very close friends who were into theater, which became very dramatic. And then I was entering into a deep liaison, or what do you call it, a sort of relationship with a woman as a young boy living at home of his mother's cooked food, mother's food,
Wow.
which was unthinkable. So it was a what do you call a robber and police game. I mean, I wasn't hiding all the time,
Right.
hiding from the eyes of society, hiding behind here, hiding behind there, not not getting caught, so to say, not getting caught walking on the streets with a woman, or holding her hands, or much less going out somewhere with her, or whatever, So we played this hide and seek game for about a year, after which I said, oh no, this can't go on. So I spoke to my extremely considerate, mild and liberal-minded father, actually. And he said, Sriram, I don't mind whatever you do as long as you don't ask me to tell your mother. So it's your job, you tell your mother.
I see.
So I said, oh my God, I was hoping that he would sort of talk to her. But anyway, my mother didn't really take it too well. She said, I might get a heart attack. What are you doing? I said, okay, if you're going to get a heart attack, you're going to get a heart attack. That's it. I was pretty tough. And said, okay.
She had a concern about Anjali being from the West and being a non-Hindu.
Not only that, all that on top of the fact that I was dating with a woman and I was still a youngster at home. It was not the time my elder sister and my elder brother weren't still married. One elder sister and my elder brother weren't married yet. And I was already sort of dating with a woman. So it was unthinkable. So anyway, so this became a very major conflict in my personal life. And then this sort of very emotional experience of going on stage and acting and all the emotions it rakes up in you. And then this Desikachar and yoga became a very strong, what do you call, pole.
Right.
I would say anchor. I'm saying anchor is the right word. The yoga became, with Desikachar and Prabhakar, became a very big anchor in my personal life.
Right.
And what was beautiful was it, in some sense, I could live with my experience and understanding of the very liberal, revolutionary, modern Western thinking based on the people I had read and based on the theater ideas we were playing. And it integrated the old traditional knowledge, which was part of my own childhood, part of my own background, and which I loved,
Right.
And the temples.
So how did this progress? You were being pulled. You're very drawn to what you were studying with Desikachar and his assistant, and I'm so fascinated that you had the opportunity to be in to understand even the language of Krishnamacharya and the teaching that he was giving out there. So this was extraordinary. So how did it progress your participation in the Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram and the conflict of being out in the world, being a young boy, dating a wonderful Western woman and artist, and among all these eccentric theatre people and so forth? What happened?
Yeah, it eventually happened that also because also of Anjali, it was important for us, if we wanted to continue as a partners, I had to get to know her culture too.
Yeah.
So we decided that we would officially sort of confirm that we are partners in front of my family. And so we did that, and I took leave and went to her country for 2 years.
I
So,
see.
and to stay there and to make sure. And in the meantime, and we stayed on, but we were in India as long as she had her basic education in Bharatanatyam, so that she could start performing. So she had covered 2.5 years in India. She had a strong foundation, and her teachers were very good to her. And so she did her Arangetram, or initial performance. So we moved to Germany for 2 years and started living together for the first time. And that was when I decided that my life has to, I have to have one pole. I can't be between, being in a traditional profession, or trying to go into a traditional life, a la going to Varanasi, or being an engineer, or being into theater and modern life. So I had to decide. And so I decided that it is important for me 2 years of West, and I'll be there, have my experience and have a taste of the West, and go back to India to restart, to rewind and start a new life. And these 2 years were very important for us as partners. And of course, also for me to have a distance to India. And what was very beautiful was that Desikachar and Prabhakar, the teacher with whom I was regularly learning asanas, they were both extremely friendly to me. They became, they took interest in my life. They got to know Anjali too. They got to know my personal background. And I had that sort of blessing and well wishes. So after 2 years, we came back to India. And when we came back to India, we were a couple, we were established, we were accepted. My family was very open to us, and it all went very smoothly. And this was when Desikachar said, the place is open. You come and engage yourself full time into learning and ultimately teaching yoga. But so he really opened up a huge thing for me. And I was still a little scared. It was, was he going to manipulate me? Was he going to sort of, here's somebody who's floundering a little bit, not knowing exactly where his moorings are. Is he going to capture me and maybe, make a sort of personal, mold me according to his wishes? Am I really somebody who's totally, who wants to be totally devoted to him? So I had a lot of conflicts. But then Prabhakar and many of Desikachar's students, they were all teaching with him. They were all an amazing group of rebellious dropouts out of modern society who were not traditionalists. So we were all so he was, Desikachar, there was one of the most amazing things about him. He managed to gather around him a group of people who were all liberal, but in some sense tradition bound, or with knowledge of tradition, but who were not at all conservative, who were not at all narrow-minded, who were very open to the modern world, very liberal thinkers. So, suddenly I found myself in the midst of a group of young men and women who were all had dropped out, who were all liberal thinkers. I would have never in my life anywhere in India found such a group of vibrant people with vibrant ideas. And all of us, our uniting factor was yoga and Desikachar.
Right.
I think it's an amazing contribution of Desikachar that he could draw people, even if I look at many of you from the 70s, 80s, early 90s, etc. You have been interested in JK. You have been interested in alternate thinking. You've been interested in alternate healing. You've all interested in alternate societies. You have experienced the hippie culture. You've experienced the drug culture. So there was a lot of people, even from the Western students, who were not the run-of-the-mill people who wanted to do yoga because it's interesting or new. So there was a huge commonality amongst all of us, and this commonality was represented by a mind called Desikachar, which was very much into yoga, but not in the traditional conservative way. So I found this very amazing, and that really wrapped me in, so to say.
I often say that Desikachar was a bridge from his father to the modern world, and that, you know, as you said, Krishnamacharya taught in Sanskrit and Tamil, and he was, you know, really of an ancient person with his, you know, deeply rooted in this wisdom culture of ancient times, and
Yeah.
it forth. And it was really the brilliance of Desikachar and his modern, you know, Western style education, science and engineering and so forth. And also his visits to Europe of many times going to teach due to Krishnamurti. He said that it was JK that helped Desikachar understand the Western mind. He said once that JK taught him everything about the West. He said he taught him how to eat with a knife and fork in Europe, you know. So I understand what you're saying there. Was that your experience also, that Desikachar was a bridge for you from the ancient wisdom that Krishnamacharya brought forth into the modern world, and it was Desikachar who was that catalyst for you?
Absolutely. And suddenly I was in the sort of in the atmosphere of a person where I could integrate the different facets of my life, where I could resolve the conflicts, you know, conflicting experiences which I've had. I could resolve the conflicting experiences which I had gone through.
Yeah.
Without making it a sort of trauma or making it a problem.
Right.
I mean, I could let them stand next to each other and think it's a very colorful picture. Why not?
Yeah.
Because finding peace is not about, you know, not about making a whole lot of pieces.
Right.
You know, then you're just sort of doing some repair work. You don't have a painting, you just have a collage. And it's so actually something which he told me at that time, I mean, I'll try to put it into his own words. It came to me as very, very striking. See, the question of whether you need a God or whether you need a religious picture or whether you need whether you need a religious head or even a guru, you know, who imposes upon you and say, yes, so that's it, you do meditation. Because as I told you, my question was meditation. No, I was not so much interested in sort of, you know, asanas or something. But he said something which is very, very amazing. See, this meditation is an unraveling. There is always mystery around us, yeah? You can find mystery everywhere, provided you as a seeker is serious. And mystery cannot be limited to symbols or God. Mystery can be found in anything, provided we seek it. So it's in the hands of the seeker.
Right.
You know? So, I mean, you can take a piece of a leaf, a fallen leaf, and it's a piece of mystery you can unravel. So it can present itself as it's as complex as, let's say, for instance, a breath. And you can say it's breath, it's going in and out and finished. You're done with it. But you keep looking at it, it becomes such a mystery. So you can really go into deep thought and reflection and find out about existence or your own existence, why you are here. So this idea came across very strongly in the way he tried to support deep reflection without saying, you know, we are going to do some deep reflection. It's like, you know, somebody saying, we are going to do some fantastic asana, we are going to do handstand, come on.
We are going to be the best meditator from here to Mount Kailash. Yeah. He had his feet very firmly in his father's camp, though, didn't he? He was deeply rooted in everything that his teacher was, deeply learned from so much time with his father in his father's world. And yet he traveled lightly into the modern world too, and as you said, gathered all these people gathered us around him who were dropouts and hippies and alternative lifestyle people, very much of modern world. And he seemed to be able to be a bridge into these minds in a way that we could understand a little bit about his father's world. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, because I think in a sense, see, he himself has had these conflicts in a sense. See, unlike his 3 sisters and his 2 brothers, I mean, okay, the 2 elder sisters got married early, but they were, I mean, at least the second sister, I know she's learned from Krishnamacharya in great depths, I think she's one of his very important students. And the youngest sister of Desikachar, she was very young, and of course, therefore she was at home at a time when Krishnamacharya would probably have had a lot of time. So she, I guess, in that sense, also learned a lot from him. But the 2 sons of Krishnamacharya, the Desikachar's elder brother and younger brother, learned continuously and for over many years with him, and stayed with him, and even taught along with Krishnamacharya in his early years in Chennai, in Madras. I mean, in the same house, sometimes in the same rooms. Desikachar left. He became an engineer. He went to study. He became an engineer. He left and was working. And at a later point, we all know this from his biography, or from Krishnamacharya's biography, that how Desikachar came back into wanting to study from his father. So Desikachar really understood the other world before really coming into yoga. And also, he didn't come into yoga only as a son of a great yogi, but also somebody who thought yoga is important.
Yeah.
Yoga has a lot of meaning, has a lot of substance, is very relevant to the modern world. So he came out of a conviction, not out of a family tradition, or because it was normal.
Right.
And of course, he not only was into this modern world of civil engineering or whatever, he moved away from the tradition, not just away from being with his parents, but also moving away from the tradition and, being very liberal, moving with people from all castes and communities, and being a fun person. And therefore, I think he developed a very liberal mind. And imagine, one of his earliest students is Krishnamurti, So I'm sure, so he really, that would have given the rest, to sort of sharpen his wits and sharpen his thinking, and make him, in spite of his devoted feelings towards his father, remain critical and whatever. So I think Desikachar also integrates a lot of very, very different factors in his own personality and his own being. And very fascinating person. Yes,
he was. He did seem to integrate them in a way that was pretty seamless to me. I mean, he could bring in. He fell in love with Jaykrishnamurti in a very tangible way. He was deeply grateful for that relationship. And then later on, Yuji Krishnamurti, and they became very, very close
to each other too.
Yeah, and I witnessed that intimate connection that they had. And he seemed to be able to straddle this world of tradition and hold it very dearly. And yet he understood and felt what was being offered by the 2 Krishnamurtis.
Yeah, this is really amazing. See, I remember once many years ago, I was teaching at that time in the Mandiram, and it was a German scholar. He had organized a very big sort of inter-religious meeting or symposium, worldwide symposium in Madras. And there were people from all over the world, including Dalai Lama, etc., had come to speak. And Desikachar was also invited to speak. Yeah, this young German man, he was learning with Desikachar. He was coming to Yoga Mandiram, taking classes. And he had invited Dalai Lama, he had invited the head of the Shivananda ashram in Rishikesh and all types of people, you know. And then Desikachar asked some of us to join him. So we gave him company and we all went over there. And it was sometime one morning. And then he gave a lecture and it was over. And after some time, some other lecture, I think Dalai Lama, somebody else spoke. And then there's the head of one of these ashrams in Rishikesh spoke, you know. And this man was talking. He was in an orange robe, etc. And we were sitting in the second row or first row, something, and Desikachar suddenly stood up. You know, I mean, we are very obedient students. We were, you know, if your teacher stands, you have to stand. You can't not sit, you know. So we had to stand up, and he walked out, and we had to walk out. I mean, the three of us who were the three students, we were so embarrassed walking out in the middle of somebody speaking. But that was him. He says, "No, I've got people waiting in the Yoga Mandiram. I got my agenda, and I'm going." I mean, it was one way of saying, you know, I've got a simple agenda and I'm going to follow it. And the other way, and also saying at the same time, this man in orange robes, I'm not particularly interested in what he has to say.
Right.
So he had a very rebellious way of dealing with things too. And so he was an amazing person. The thing is, he could put in, he was very simple and also expressing things. I mean, sometimes some very deep philosophical thoughts would come up in very, very simple words, which made him very special, which is why...
he definitely didn't like the spiritual business of...
No, he despised it, I would say.
Didn't like this Swamiism and people posing as gurus and you know, Noah's... he
despised it. He despised it because and in that sense, he was also like his father. His father was also, although he was such a hugely learned traditional scholar, he was in his own way a rebel.
Yeah,
he would say, "You are not a Brahmin. You are just a. I mean, you're born into some community, but if it's because you're born into some community, you don't become a Brahmin." A Brahmin who's got some sort of learning, who's sort of certain inclinations, and who's really on the seek out for Brahman. You know, right. Somebody who's who's seeking what is Brahma, what is the God consciousness. Yeah. So he had his very, very clear ideas about things like caste and religion, and in a very, very liberal way.
Yeah, I recall being. You mentioned the Ramakrishna Mutt down in the Mayapur tank, and I used to like going there too. There was something there, you know. There was a power, a presence, or something.
Yeah, it's true.
And I was well aware at that time that Desikachar had dismissed, you know, Hindu temple religion. You know, anything that was exploiting the gullibility of the public, and the whole. Yeah. Sort of fake holy isms of, you know, Indian, you know, Orthodox systems. And but one day I walked down there with him, and there was a sort of a quietness came over him, you know. And I said to him, "I like going to that place," and he said, his words were, "Yes, there's something there," he said. There's something there. And another occasion, I took him to New Zealand when we did The Heart of Yoga. The book came out in 1995. And he came down and we toured him around New Zealand a little bit. And he went to this Hindu temple in Auckland. And again, he entered it with some sort of like sincerity. This man who was, you know, deeply influenced by both Krishnamurtis, he nevertheless had a sentiment for the sincerity of the culture of Veda. That he didn't just abandon it. That's what I meant. He said had his foot in both camps somehow. He was a bridge of ancient to modern. I felt.
I think so, because he just didn't. I mean, let us take Yoga Sutra for instance. I mean, he had very, very great reverence for this text, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was a very deep reverence, and although he did not care much for these modern Hindu institutions, or didn't care for them almost not at all, still he had very great reverence for what the Upanishads taught or the Vedas taught. And I mean, he was not gullible. I mean, he wouldn't say, oh, the God is out there and the God is in the moon and God is in the wind. And he wouldn't say God is in the moon and the wind in the sense it might be interpreted by somebody who's very sort of gullibly religious or somebody who's fanatically religious. He understood the sort of intensity of feeling behind it, you know, understood the intensity of, you know, yearning to address forces which are not within us,
Right.
yearning to address or to yearning to relate to or communicate with forces which are outside us. So that's why also Vedic chanting became a very, very strong influence in his life. And I mean, his house, I mean, when Krishnamacharya recited, the building would resonate, you know. He had a loud, strong voice,
Right.
and it was very beautiful voice, even for such an old man. And yeah, it was fascinated by Vedic chanting.
His mother, Namagiri Amma, would say that at one point she could not tell who was chanting, whether it was Desikachar or her husband, because
Okay.
he duplicated the mantra so
well. Okay, yeah, sure, yeah.
And that became an important part of your life, didn't it? This Vedic chant.
It became part of my life because, see, I had this background in Indian music. So, of course, because of that, my voice is trained and I can hold the pitch and whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a Tamilian, which means my knowledge, and although I was born into because I was born into a Brahmin family, I had a lot of Sanskrit in my Tamil. It's a lot of Sanskrit words going to the Tamil of Brahmins, and therefore I had some sort of connection to Sanskrit, and I knew a lot of songs and prayers in Sanskrit, but otherwise zero knowledge of Sanskrit. So it all started only with yoga, with at the times of Desikachar.
Yeah.
But he offered these classes, the Vedic Vadhyanam classes, and he said, Sriram, you must join. Actually, wished that I joined because he thought it was good for me, because I had a good voice and because he knew that I had a good diction because of my music background, etc. And theater background, of course, you know, it makes you very conscious of, you know, how you use your voice. And I started and slowly got involved, and but at the same time I still had my, you know, teenager precautions, getting into, you know, Vedas, and it sounds a little bit like too religious, etc. But of course I knew Desikachar was a very liberal person, so it was not a problem really, but still I was a little cautious. But then I slowly started to love and enjoy it.
And what is
and
that?
then what happened
What is
and
that?
then what happened
Today, Sriram? Yeah.
Sorry?
What is mantra or Vedic chanting for you now? You know, what did that do for you? What is it for you? This love that you have that seemed to arise quite spontaneously and naturally.
For me, I'm going to a world where I'm speaking with forces which are there, which I'm not thinking about in my day-to-day life, but which are there and of which I am a part.
Right.
I mean, it gives me a sense of being a microcosmic particle which is sort of just not merely part of a macrocosm, but a microcosmic particle in which the entire macrocosm is sort of present. This sort of a awareness many of the Vedic chanting texts impart. It's the subject of many of the Vedic chanting texts. Secondly, it is a sort of, and like if I would go to a shrink, I mean, if I would go to let us say, a psychoanalyst, I would lie there and talk. I mean, this talking is it's a sort of emptying your soul, emptying your mind, coming to a state of, of being quiet, calm, and empty. So speaking out loudly, throwing the words out and projecting your voice is part of this process of emptying the soul, So it's a part of linking yourself and therefore becoming empty, and surrendering yourself and therefore becoming empty. So it's become a very, very major influence for me in my psyche, in my mind, and also for my meditation practice of understanding life. So that's also why it's become very important. Yeah.
Seem to link you to an ancient world? Do you feel
and
like
that's exactly the third point? That's the third point I'm coming to. See, whenever I chant, without me wanting to or sort of trying to wish it, it happens. I'm linked to Desikachar, for instance. Somebody he's there, and of course, every Sunday there was, let's say, almost every Sunday. I try to do it every Sunday. I do a long piece of chant. It's called Arunam. It takes about an hour. It's a very long chant which is addressed to the morning, to the rising sun. And there is a tradition which Krishnamacharya was in which every Sunday this Arunam is recited in the mornings for an hour. And it was an explicit wish of Krishnamacharya that it be continued, this tradition, and Desikachar was doing it. He was doing it all the years, and whenever I was living in the meantime in the West, and whenever I was in India, I would chant with him every Sunday, etc. And now, since he's no more, I try to do it and keep it up every Sunday. So what I'm saying, so when I'm doing this, it's suddenly Desikachar is there, Krishnamacharya is there, because I've also done this along with Krishnamacharya and Desikachar on some Sundays in India when Krishnamacharya was alive. So they are there, the two of them are there, but it's also a question of an entire tradition. So it's almost like saying things which have already been said thousands of years ago, and integrating mankind or humankind or knowledge of humankind into this. So it's, why are we praying to the sun? So it's not about, the sun needs us. The sun doesn't need us, because the human being is almost just some sort of a cataclysmic thing which is there, which can get wiped out any day or any second. But sun doesn't need us, and sun will go on, but still we need the sun. So it's just like saying, hello sun, thank you that you are there.
Yeah.
So it's giving him that piece of respect or recognition, which is its due.
Yeah.
And it's not that the sun is going to miss out on my recognition, but if I recognize it, then I sort of, I know my place. I know the diminutive, size of my place here.
You feel your place in the cosmic domain, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. So
Eternal.
it's a beautiful, and I'm linked together with all these great masters and all these great human beings who have lived before us, and
last year we went, just before the pandemic began, we went on pilgrimage to Kailash and to Lake Manasarovar and followed in the steps of Krishnamacharya. And came down to the Mysore Palace and in the Maharaja Mysore, and we taught in this temple, a Lakshmi temple, an ancient temple. It's Indian historic site, and where apparently Krishnamacharya had taught the Maharaj of Mysore. It was his teaching sort of platform, and I sat there on those stones and felt that, you know, they hundreds of generations had gone before and walked those stones, and you know, the mantras and so forth. I could feel this continuity of our ancestors, you know. So I have a feeling for what you're saying there.
Yeah, and that's something which only through one can only get through a sense of parampara, you know.
Yeah.
If you know the word, you know, in the sense of, you know, parampara, in sense of, you know, from one teacher to teacher to teacher, etc.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you specifically. So Desikachar is your teacher, is your personal teacher. You feel that connection to him specifically as your teacher, correct?
Yes, I do, of course. Yeah, very much.
Could you describe that feeling, what is that relationship to be able to say, I have a teacher? Because I just mentioned that because, of course, it's a very important part of the yoga tradition, of the Guru Parampara, to actually, you know, in fact, Desikachar, he called it the heart of yoga, you know, this teacher relationship. Could you describe what does that mean for you to be able to say, I have a teacher?
He is somebody who knows me. He knows me.
Right.
It doesn't even, I wouldn't even say he has the total understanding for me or total love for me. I mean, those are things which come and don't come, you know. But he really knows me, but not to knows me in terms of, you know, somebody who's got something, who's got any negative ideas, totally to the contrary. I just mean this, the mere fact of having somebody who knows you well, where you feel this human being knows you, is an amazing feeling, you know.
Right.
I mean, of course, it can be one's own very close friend or partner or parent who knows one also very, very well. But this person is neither your partner nor your mother or your father, you know.
Right.
This person is neutral, leads her or his own life, and is away from you. And in that sense, it's totally different. So to have somebody who really knows you, and not just knows you, but also has, that's one thing. That's very essential for me, that Desikachar was one person who knew me. And maybe why I also regard him as a deeper teacher is he has not only known me, he has not fought against what I want to be. I mean, even if I have, let's say, things which he didn't like in me, or things which he wasn't accepting, he was accepting. I mean, he was accepting in terms of, not accepting things which he may not have liked or didn't like. He was still not trying to, he didn't try to make something else out of me, in the sense, he accepted I am this person.
Right.
He accepted me the way I was.
Right.
Meaning, I could build a biography for myself.
Right. Right.
I could build a biography for myself, you know, and say, this is the person I am.
Yeah.
So my biography is not just I'm the student of Desikachar. And of course, my biography is much more complex, or much more colorful, or much more complex, much more wild than just being the student of Desikachar. But he enabled me to see a biography, to see a continuity, you know, because he accepted, here's one person who accepted me the way I am. So I don't have to wipe out anything and say this is an embarrassing part of my biography, or this is a is a bad part of my biography, or this is a very unhappy part of my biography or something, you know. So in that sense, I feel, and because of that, I feel a little whole. I
Right.
don't feel disjointed or dismembered.
Right. He helped you go in your directions, not his directions necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He helped you
And
find your way home to
yeah.
your.
And in my personal case, Mark, I must tell you, see, because as I told you, I came from a relatively, I mean, not a poor in the sense of India, poor, but in a relatively, you know, low middle class group family. I grew up, and I had a very big struggle, you know, not having any money, and then, you know, coming to Germany then later and starting to teach yoga. And if it hadn't been for circumstances where, you know, I could manage to live, my wife was earning enough money with her dance profession. She was earning very well, actually. So we managed, and I could had a few years to get into it. But then very early when I came to Germany, I started to invite Desikachar, you know. And
Right.
because I was wanting to introduce this tradition to Germany, it was not known at all then. And I must tell you, right from not long before I invited him to Germany, right from the day I came to Germany, he's been a friend to me. He's much more than many of my friends who never understood me living in the West because they don't know Western life. Desikachar knew Western life, he could understand me. And on top of it, he not only understood me, he was really very empathizing towards, you know, being somebody who's living in two worlds. And then I started inviting him, and he has done so much to promote me as a yoga teacher, to sort of support me as a yoga teacher, and sort of also speak positively. That, I mean, my popularity or my rising popularity in the 90s, I really have to thank Desikachar, which means he not only, you know, was a guru in that sense. He really gave me a profession, and he helped me financially to come out of the doldrums, to sort of to sort of start leading a comfortable life. So in that sense, he's been a fabulous help for me personally.
Right. He helped you in practical ways.
Very practical ways, yes.
As well as help you understand some of the deeper things that probably would have been lost to us if we just met Krishnamacharya.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to understand what this
No,
elderly
no,
man.
not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I can tell you, there have been, when we were living in India, when I had some health issues, or my wife had a health issue, and I mean, she was a foreigner doing a very enervating dance
Mhm.
and performing in India. So when she had health issues, or a little child had health issues, we would go to Desikachar for consultation. So he would give some breathing practices, some medicines even. And he would consult his father. If it was too complicated, he would consult his father for some help, and he would consult his mother also. So his mother would give some recipes, she would pound some medical powders. Father would give advice. So, you know, so he was helping us even at this level very much, you know, as a family.
Right.
So it is very profound, yeah. So so in that sense, I am really extremely lucky since if I were to think back, you know.
Yeah. They were both very humble men, weren't they? Krishnamacharya and Desikachar. I mean, they were certainly proud, yet they both would take the trouble to help anyone in 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 egalitarian ways, not being the boss, not being senior, not being the authorities of those who they were helping. They would do
I
their
think
best
so. I mean,
to help.
Desikachar, in the case of Desikachar, very, very much indeed, because see, he was almost keen on having a lot of people from Western countries, from other continents, from Asian continents, from African continents, from the Hindu, from the Christian community of India, from the Muslim community of India, from the very poor sections of India. He was almost, bent on having people from all backgrounds, because to practice this egalitarianism, which was sort of very, very fundamental to his belief.
Yeah. I like.
Which is very beautiful. Yeah.
I like what you said, Sriram, is that Desikachar came to yoga as someone who was already informed of engineering and science. He had already been doing something, and that he came to yoga on the decision from his own empirical investigation of the subject. He was convinced of it intellectually and emotionally before he really entered the serious study of it. He told a story of seeing a New Zealand woman who was deeply moved because Krishnamacharya had healed her of a lifelong illness. And he saw the woman run across the yard and give his father a big hug, which is a very unusual sight. You don't hug a stern, elderly Brahmin male, especially a teacher. But he witnessed this, and he said from that time on, he knew there was something very important that his father was offering, and he wanted to investigate what that was. And from that point on, he began to study at the age of 27. But he was already very much involved in another lifestyle before he took that on.
Yeah.
I took him to meet that New Zealand woman when he came in 95. Her name was, I forget her name. Kay Malvernon was her name. And they had a meeting, and it was a beautiful meeting. But,
how lovely.
I witnessed what you just said, that he was very interested, and I think his father too, that this yoga traveled throughout the world to every kind of person, to all cultural groups, all religions, all countries. And he sparked that work in a way. And I think that was partly why he was so happy about what you did, to take this knowledge to Europe.
Yes, exactly. I think that because of that, we had a very special connection, because he thought I was somebody off the fields, going and living there and transporting his teachings the way he's understood it, and sort of spreading the knowledge there. He was very, very happy about the fact that I left India. So, although I would have, although for him in a certain way it was a loss, because I was a teacher who was, gone for the Yoga Mandiram. But so it was a personal loss for him, but in a sense it was also a personal gain for him, not only for myself, that he suddenly had a teacher, from his own background coming there and living here. And he appreciated that very much. And that's why, his appreciation was also the reason why I could sort of really build up here in the West so easily. He gave me a lot of support. And in a sense, I do play a very special role, especially given the fact that I'm in Germany. And see, through all my travels in my late theater years in India, I also started learning German, and then I met this German woman, and so I was getting into German language, and then suddenly I was living in Germany, and I started to read and my wife was already writing books at that time. Started to read a lot, her writings, etc., on dance, etc. So I got into German language, and suddenly I was in a country where there was, not even in English, but in a European language. I was teaching as an Indian, texts of India coming straight out of the background. And so I think that that made a lot of impact. My Yoga Sutra translation in German is appreciated very deeply, and because of my connection to Sanskrit and to the Indian tradition and my knowledge of German, I played a sort of very specific and positive role here. But you see, if you look at Desikachar, his as you said a little earlier, it was really his mission, and of course carrying on the mission of his father to really bring yoga across to all continents and to all people all over the world. But behind Krishnamacharya's thinking and behind Desikachar's thinking even more, there is this very, very strong idea of universalism in terms of there is a yoga is not something conservative, is not something fanatic, is not something exclusive. I mean, we all breathe, even animals, we all breathe, all mammals in the same way, similar to how humans do. So the breath is a common factor for all of us. So what more do you want? So we are all one species. If you look at the Sankhya, which is a sort of a foundation of yoga, it says there's only one human species, very clearly. It's a very strong statement in the middle of Sankhya Karika. So, so this idea that we are one human species is very strong behind the way in which Krishnamacharya, Desikachara understood yoga. And today, if I think back of Desikachara, I'm also very, very glad he was my teacher and not somebody else, because if I would look at many of the maybe teachers of the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s in India, of the big teachers, I wonder, if I would my premises, or if I would sort of suggest, oh, which party would they vote for, what would their political inclinations be, etc. I know I'm damn sure Desikachar's political inclination is not for any Hindu party or Christian housing party. He would say nothing doing.
Yeah, nothing doing.
So no Hindutva party would ever get any vote from him,
Yeah.
So, and I don't know how many of these yoga teachers, masters would think similarly,
Right.
So I'm very glad I was in the right boat, even in this count, in terms of having become a student of Desikachar or not of somebody else.
Yeah.
So, and if you look back at somebody like Ramakrishna and Vivekananda, who played a very major role in modern Indian spirituality, Ramakrishna, of course, very, very much, but even Vivekananda, see, Vivekananda he was a Hindu, what do you call, in orange robes, unlike, let's say, Desikachar or even Krishnamacharya. But he was speaking of a universal religion, of a universal culture, of a universal faith. And he believed very strongly in the role of Vedas and Hinduism in presenting it. But he was never, ever placing Hinduism above Christianity or above Islam or above anything else.
Right.
For him, even the soul, given the times in which he was living, where Islam culture was a very major factor in Indian politics and society before partition, etc. So long before partition, where India was a bigger country, and so the soul of India is Hindu, but the body is very Islamic. In a sense, the two are sort of they are very much intertwined.
Yeah.
So there is no fundamentalism at all in these big people, and there I'm so glad, because Desikachar is really, young minds are dangerous because they can go in any directions. So I'm so glad I've entered into the subject of Indian spirituality in a deep way. I entered in the household or in the footsteps or in the in the environment of Desikachar and not of somebody else.
Yeah, the summary statement that yoga must be adapted to each person and the cultural background of each person. Whatever, if a person's an atheist, that's to be respected, if a person,
Absolutely.
whatever their religion or non-religion might be, adapt yoga to the needs of that person, not to migrate them to your point of view or your language or your particular cultural identity, but respect theirs.
Absolutely.
Fundamental.
And of course, you know, even if we have people who think differently politically or socially, I mean, it's their right to think the way they are thinking.
Yeah.
And so there is also a universality about accepting different thinking, you know. So I don't think it's an exclusion of people who are thinking differently.
Yeah.
It's a statement that this inclusiveness is a fundamental truth. It's almost altruistic, you know. So, and I think Desikachar stood very much behind it. And so being very highly tolerant towards anybody and everybody, whether it is a very conservative thinker or liberal thinker, or maybe even a fundamentalist, a thinker inclined to fundamentalistic ideas, or thinker who's extremely anti-fundamentalistic, whatever, you know. It's very inclusive, and this idea is very much present in yoga, that there is, the mind is always presenting truths the way the mind is positioned.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So there's always an angle and a sort of a perspective. Yeah.
Right.
There is no objective truth. There is only a perspective-based truth.
Right.
You know?
Which is to be respected and received in each person's case.
Yeah, exactly. So in that sense, it's a great teaching. And Krishnamacharya was, you know, given the fact that he came from such a strongly traditional background, it's amazing the amount of liberalism in his thought.
Yeah.
I know from some of his very young female students, the ideas about womanhood, the ideas about the role of women in society and about the rights of women in society. I mean, it's incredible. And it's all based on, I mean, in his case, it's always everything is based on some quotations from some parts of the Vedas or some other texts. But I mean, he was extremely liberal.
Yeah, and he did his best in a deeply misogynist society to
in a deeply misogynist society.
for human rights, women's rights, and bring them as in their own empowerment as life itself.
Yeah. And you know, it's also a little sad part of the story, because Krishnamacharya has trained so many young women, and young when he was in the 80s and 90s, women who were very young then, you know, at that time. And of course, his own daughters and others who have been close to him. And none of these people, only a very few handful of people who have had big interaction with Krishnamacharya have become teachers in international scale. And many of these women are not even known, you know, who have learned so much from Krishnamacharya. And of course, from all these students, Desikachar plays a unique role for merely because of the fact that he's been longest with him and closest with him, you know.
Right. Yeah. So by the time you got to Europe, the young students of Krishnamacharya, mainly the famous BKS Iyengar, was already well established as a master of yoga. As was a number of, including the Shivananda Swamis who toured the West and lived in the West. And so there was a lot of, these brands of yoga had already been established in Europe. And I imagine, so you come along and in this this yoga world that was already established, I imagine that you were a small voice in the midst of a big growing yoga scene that was quite different from the knowledge that you held and the way that you taught. So how did that work for you to be thrown into a world that already had a lot of presumptions about what is yoga, and even, you know, the styles of yoga of, you know, very exaggerated sort of gymnastics being popularized as what yoga is? How did you deal with all of that?
It wasn't easy at all. It wasn't easy at all. I mean, first of all, in Germany, I think in most parts of Europe too, yoga wasn't as popular as it was in England or in the US, and I don't know how it was in Australia or New Zealand in those years, in the 80s, in the late 80s and early 90s. But in Germany, it was not too popular. But of course, I mean, it was popular enough that all these styles were established. There were schools in all the major towns and cities, yoga schools, I mean. And one of the early questions I was confronted with was, what is the style of yoga you're teaching?
Right.
I said, I'm teaching yoga. There's no name to it.
Yeah.
It's yoga. And then my wife said, you know, you're going to get bugged by this problem, so just call it traditional yoga.
Right.
So if somebody bugged me with a question, I would say, okay, it's traditional yoga. So traditional yoga, as though it was a brand name, yeah, which wasn't. I wasn't using traditional yoga as a brand name, but I'm just saying, you know, if somebody asked me the question, I would say it, you know. But I was to students who were really coming and practicing and, you know, wanting to learn more. If they would ask me, what shall I call this yoga and what name shall I give? I would say it's yoga. There's no name to it. And already I remember when I was teaching in the 80s at the Yoga Mandiram, Desikachar put us meaning me, he put this question across to all his students who were teaching at the Mandiram. This question of whether we give the name, give yoga a name here. And because he said in many of my Western students, he told us that time when we were in India, wishing to have a name because everybody's got a name. And there is an idea that the name Vini Yoga be used as a name for this tradition. And you see, I mean, he just posed it as a question to all of us. And of course, we were all, for us, there was no question of bringing any brand name into this. So all of us almost like, in one voice said unison, no, nothing doing, no name, it's yoga. So, and Desikachar was glad to receive this answer because it is his own opinion too, I guess. And anyway, so the word Vini-yoga didn't enter India, so to say, you know, although it did enter into parts of the West. And so when I came to the West and people, there were just two students of Desikachar they were actually studying with me when I was living in India. But when I shifted to Germany, they started taking classes with Desikachar. Desikachar started to teach them. And so apart from them, there wasn't anybody here who knew Desikachar really. And so the style Vini Yoga wasn't known, but it was known a little bit in France and England. And so people who had heard about it asked me. I said, no, I don't know what's Vini. I don't want to do it. I don't have anything to do with Vini Yoga. I'm not teaching Vini Yoga, I told them, you know. So I've avoided this question. So it was very difficult. But then the name was one problem. The other problem was, this is not yoga because classical yoga is Dhanurasana, Shalabhasana, Sarvangasana, Halasana, headstand, etc., etc. And this is not classical yoga, you know, raising your arms and lowering your arms and bending your body and, you know, what is this, etc. This is not yoga. So I had to convince them this is yoga. I had to convince them and said, this is Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. You can read what it says about yoga. And this is Hatha Yoga Pradipika. You can say what it says. It says, buddy, you stay all alone in a hut, far away from society, no travel, no women, no nothing, eating once a day, living absolutely a quiet life with no contacts with anybody, not speaking, and you do 6 hours of Paschimottanasana, 6 hours of Gomukhasana, etc. So this is Hatha Yoga, dear man. You want to do this Hatha Yoga, you better do that. This is not Hatha Yoga, which you are doing. A little bit of, standing on your head and standing on your shoulders and doing this. This is some sort of an asana practice. So this is your way of understanding yoga. This is my way of understanding yoga.
Right.
And if you look at Hatha Yoga Pradipika, what does it say? Breath, breath, breath. So you'll have 200, let's say out of 100 verses in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, 80 of them will be talking about the breath. So where is the breath? Where are you talking about the breath here in the way you're practicing yoga? See, we are doing all about breath here. Look at Patanjali, how much importance it gives to, Yoga Sutra gives to breath in comparison to, the role of body. So I had a lot of good arguments. And of course, people liked it because it was doing wonders for their physical body. And they said, actually, this is doing, just standing on your knees, bending forward and going into that cat pose and coming back and getting onto your knees. Oh, really, with slow movement and exhalation and inhalation. One is so concentrated, the mind becomes quiet, the body becomes calm, and the breath is flowing well. And then this is yoga. So they slowly started to understand this yoga can be so simple. So there was an acceptance slowly, and of course many people didn't like it, but a lot of people started to like it. And there were some young people who were 20 or 25, they liked it very much for a while. And of course, because I was myself very young, I was doing a lot of very complicated physical postures also, asanas, and vinyasas with jumps and all this. So I taught them. And then some people, for whom it was not enough, I said, you wait for another 10 years. You're 35 now. When you're 45, you'll come back. When you're 45 and 50, you will not want to do this yoga, and suddenly you will call this gentleman yoga or lady yoga, because now you're a little bit advanced age, and you know that you can't twist and turn and bend your body like you did with 25.
Yeah. But I'm sure that you brought these principles from Krishnamacharya into Europe, and that many people who were practicing the popular styles that had been seeded by Mr. Iyengar and so forth, you would have given these principles that they could have added to the yogas that they were doing.
That was probably the most amazing. That was the most amazing experience for these students or people who learned yoga. That finally there's somebody who's explaining the fundamentals and the logic and the meaning and the behind the practice, and also giving an idea of where we are getting towards.
Yeah. That's what I see. These principles that we hold from Krishnamacharya through Desikachar, they belong in everything that derived from Krishnamacharya. So Iyengar being a young student and Pattabhi Jois being young students of Krishnamacharya, these principles can certainly be included in all the asana that they taught. And the whole matter of vinyasa, krama, sequencing, correct sequencing according to the needs of each person.
Yeah.
And the breath and bandha being the basis of the asana, whatever it is. And I think this is what we represent as, holding the total spectrum of the information that Krishnamacharya brought forth from those wisdom traditions.
Yeah.
And being integrated into the one yoga.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's only one brand of yoga, and it's capital Y yoga.
Yeah, exactly. There's only one brand, it's capital Y yoga, nothing else. Yes.
Well, I think you've done a wonderful job in Europe to bring these principles through, and of course, you've only just gotten started, and the job's not over. But it's,
But sorry.
no, well, it's exciting times. You know, we've gotten started. We're on a roll. And now I think the world is perhaps more receptive than ever to receive the knowledge that you hold.
Yeah. But in comparison to the 70s, 80s or 80s or 90s, now in the sort of 2020s, we stand at a different point with regard to yoga. I mean, it's another type of it's a totally different type of problem which we are confronted with. I mean, one of the problems I feel yoga is confronted with is the idea of why are we doing asanas? And the concept of fitness and physical wellness and etc. is becoming a very major factor why people do yoga, which is very well and good. I mean, it's very good to stay fit. It's very good to stay healthy and keep the body pepped and and sort of your vitality or whatever going. But still, there is a totally different aspect to this bodily practice, which is also very deeply embedded in the yoga of Krishnamacharya. And I am worried that it'll get subsumed by this sort of flood of yoga for the body, you know, this sort of body-centered yoga of the modern times. So there I'm a little worried too about, you know, the trend yoga is taking.
Yeah, that's why I say put the principles of Krishnamacharya into the yoga that you know and love. They belong there. You know, whatever style or brand, or if somebody comes at it from only a, you know, body fitness point of view or a gymnastic point of view, well, that's just the fact of it. But now put these principles in, you know, inhale from above, receptivity, exhale from below, strength, receiving, the asana creating bandha that's inherent to the asana itself, you know, to put these in no matter what you're doing, no matter what power yoga or hot yoga or Iyengar yoga, Bikram yoga, whatever it is, put these principles in and see what happens
into it.
your body wellness, your body strength, your body flexibility, and your mind clarity and so forth.
Yeah, that's a very good message, Mark. I mean, that you sort of, what you're saying, that's very important. Yeah, it's very important to sort of always relate and go back to these principles as your sort of anchor, so that you can also, you know, bring bring a different perspective, a yogic perspective into the way we approach the body. Yeah, that's a good idea. It's very important. Yeah, you're right.
Then there's the question in the world that everybody wants to have better relationships. Everybody wants to, you know, be successful in the matter of intimate relationship.
Yeah.
And I make that, you know, it's very clear, you know, that certainly in the life of our teachers, Desikachar and Krishnamacharya, they personally demonstrated this, the profundity of male-female collaboration, polarity, and deeply in their own tradition, this matter of the union of Vedanta and Tantra, you know, the influences from the ancient tantras coming into the Guru Parampara, the Ramanuja Acharya of the 10th century. And these are very important points, in that yoga was the practical means to be in the polarities that are natural to life, that are in a natural state, that allow success in human relationships, human intimate relationships. And I think that's an angle that the world is very keen to know about. The relationship of yoga to relationship, to intimate life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're seeding that knowledge throughout Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and thank goodness.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you,
it's a very important thought, actually, what you're saying here also about this, Desikachar always said yoga is about relationship and about relationship building.
yeah, and you yourself demonstrating that with your relationship with Anjali,
Yeah.
very much a collaboration of equals.
Yeah, I think so very much, because there is a factor, see, because we are living in a times where, the subject of genders, it's a very sensitive subject, and where, uh, gender philosophies have their own way of interpreting things, which are maybe not quite in concomitance with what tantric philosophies may say, but still one can, it's a basic idea in tantric as well as in yoga, where you have the idea of purusha and prakriti, or drashta and chitta. We are talking about a very, very basic duality, which is essential. So this is what Vishishta Advaita of Krishnamacharya is also about.
Mm.
It's not about it is not about duality as such, but it's about a special for a Vishishta Advaita, yeah, a special form of non-duality. So but duality is there, it's a reality, and this reality is to be found in this man woman in the male female, not man, in the male female aspects of life, or of nature, or of the cosmos. And I do think it is a very, very important, essential part of the cosmos, and which is Purusha and Prakriti. And of course, if you are saying this is an essential part, it's in you as Mark, it's in me as Sriram, it's in Anjali as a human being, or in Rosalind, or in any of us human beings, it's there, both these parts, the male and the female parts.
Yeah.
But maybe because of, the way we are, and the stuff we are made of, or the substances we are made of, a certain energy is more predominant in us, so in that sense, something else predominates a little more, and therefore we may be more male, or more female. But it's only by being confronted with the opposite that we can sort of establish a much finer or better balance within ourselves.
Beautiful.
So it's more not like me and my partner building a unity, but it's me finding a unity because I'm in a good relationship, where the partner plays a complementary role, and this partner finding her own completeness, because of being the presence of somebody who may be instigating in her this sort of completeness, by being a complementary factor in her life. So in this way we complement each other, and in a conversation you complement with your thoughts, and I complement your ideas with my thoughts. And or if you do meditate, you complement yourself with a mantra you are attached to, or you're attaching yourself to, or linking yourself to, and the mantra reveals something of itself, and therefore complements you. So even there's a dialogue. So we are in dialogue everywhere we are in dialogue everywhere and all the time. And so it's if we stay in the state of dialogue, it's always a dia. It's a dialogue. It means two factors, and therefore this duality is always there. So I think if we keep that in mind, we can even do asana practice in a different way. Look at the body and learn from the body. Not tell the body you lie down and bend your back, but look at the body too. Listen to what the body says. This is what Desikachar says. This is what Krishnamacharya says. This is also part of the idea of vinyasa krama. You don't do something with the body, you look at the body too.
Right. I like
so
what
even that becomes a conversation, it becomes a dialogue. So there is a sort of duality which you're playing with. It's a tantric idea. This is a very basic tantric idea, you know. So I think that way we are yeah, we're in a good space with the knowledge which our teachers have given us, you know.
Definitely, and I just struck by this a very simple statement from Krishnamacharya. It is yoga that joins the two to be one.
Mm.
Yoga is apparently, this is Ramanujacharya. Yoga must be there so the two are one, and they are one. But the mind lives as if they're not. So this merge of yoga with Advait, not two, but one only, God only. This observation and the practice of yoga, and particularly the receptivity, the strength that is receptive, is that practice of the two becoming one that enables us to receive another. Yeah. To receive
I think
another.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the moment you open yourself to this receptivity, then the two will merge and the completion takes place, you know?
Yeah, yeah. When you came to over to the memorial in the United States, we were deeply moved when you took the stage and you did a little Vedic chanting. And as I said, you were already in that culture. You were born into it. You know, you said yourself in this dialogue we've been having, this music, the tonality, the language was already in you. And I just would wonder if you would comment for us of the West who migrated a little bit to that culture, but you know, we don't have this ability of Vedic chanting. It's a very rare Westerner who does. But so we give it we attempt, you know. But when you gave us some mantra those days, you obviously been in the company, the personal company, and learnt Vedic mantra from Krishnamacharya and Desikachar. It was a beautiful experience to have that. And we were like, oh, we better shut up. We can't follow that, you know. So what do you have to say for us Western people who love this, fallen in love with this Vedic culture, but don't have the advantage of being of that culture? Should we give up or should we give it a try? What do you think?
See, I would say even in India, we have different languages, and people, when they recite in Sanskrit or chant in Sanskrit, their pronunciation is very influenced by their mother tongue. And therefore, a person who's got Tamil as a mother tongue will recite or speak Sanskrit in a particular tanj, a person with Hindi with another tanj, etc. So it's not really perfect. Even if somebody who is fairly good is never really perfect in that sense.
Yeah.
And there I must say, of course, I mean, I have had two very important Sanskrit teachers who I've learned from. Both of them very excellent teachers and excellent Sanskrit scholars. But Krishnamacharya was far, far, far above them in terms of scholarship and knowledge, even of Sanskrit language. And so, I mean, so Krishnamacharya was really playing in a different league, I would say. And so even for me, I know that there is a lot of shortcomings when I do it. So naturally, if you, let us say, use a person from New Zealand or from the US or some other country or Germany tries to do Sanskrit mantras, there will always be a very strong accent, a very strong move away from it. But so it's that pronunciation may not be a major factor because one can learn. One can really learn very well, and there are a lot of people who learn very beautifully in spite of not having having a strong Indian Sanskrit background. The problem, one other thing is so that can be mastered. The other thing is the voice itself. See, when you're chanting, you are addressing something. You're not addressing something which is in front of you. You're not addressing a person. You're addressing something which is abstract. And unlike, let us say, even in music, you're addressing something. Oh, you're singing to some divine force, even maybe, you know. But then music involves a lot of emotions and a lot of, you know, pining and love and sentimentality, etc. Whereas here there is no pining, no sentimentality, no erotic feeling, not even, let us say, astonishment or, you know, astonishment. It's more like it's some sort of a very majestic, very deep attitude of being connected, you know, staying connected with a greater cosmic reality. So it's a different, almost emotion, I would say, you know. So it's not any of the 8 rasas, but it's the 9th rasa, Shanta rasa. Yeah?
Right.
Which you're into. So you're not into Sringara, the erotic rasa, or Veera, the heroic rasa or something. You're in the Shanta rasa. So in that sense, it's very difficult in music, but at the same time, it's got certain qualities of the music in terms of it ought to be clear, it has to maintain pitch, etc. That's very important. So the quality of the voice is important. That's something which may be independent of your cultural background, you can still learn. Yet another factor is, see, in the Indian music, it is always flowing. You know, you can't play Indian music on a piano, theoretically, you know, you can't, because it's discrete buttons.
Yeah.
You can do it on a, what do you call it, in a violin, because it's a sort of, you know, as a, what do you call, as a, what do you call it, sort of instrument. Sorry?
By the way, it's funny that
a string instrument. That was the word I was missing. Yeah, because it's a string instrument. Oh yeah, sitar. Yes, beautiful.
Just coincidentally.
Sorry?
Just coincidentally, as you spoke it.
Yeah. So unlike a sitar where you can play it, it's difficult on a piano, yeah, or on a harmonium or something. But anyway, because there is this sort of connectivity from one tone to another.
Yeah.
Which is very, very important in Indian way of looking at music. So this is something which a Western person has to get a feel for. And I think this is something which will only come if you relate yourself to India, Indian art, Indian life even. Otherwise, it's always tuck, 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 notes.
You're right.
That doesn't work. Of course, a very good European musician doesn't play tuck, tuck, tuck.
Yeah.
There is, of course, a great connectivity from one tone to another. But the style of connectivity is a little bit different in the Indian music because, you know, it's a subject by itself. So anyway, I think if you live in India or get a feel for Indian art and Indian music, you understand what I mean, and therefore you get into it. Therefore, it becomes, let us say, authentic, this chanting. And I think it's very important, this connectivity, because there's the connectivity between the notes has something to do also with our connectivity to the greater cosmos, you know? It's not you are there and I am here, you know?
Right.
It's a sort of, almost, you know, a flowing connection between you and me. And you are there and I'm here, but our fingers are touching each other, you know?
Yeah. And it's not just poetry and it's not just art. There's something, it's the 9th rasa. It is
Shanta, yeah. Peace. Yes.
Beyond. Yeah. And so perhaps anybody can feel that and try their best with all of the technical matters of sound.
Exactly. Yeah. So one can approach this and see, as I was quoting Desikachar earlier. I mean, you can see mystery even behind anything for that matter. So you
Right.
can even see mystery behind a small text which you are chanting, behind one single mantra word which you're chanting, or behind even a line of poetry. Let us say, I don't know. I mean, you take a poetry, a line of William Blake or something, it could serve as a poetry where you really go into it as a piece of mystery which you are unraveling, and not just mumbling that poem or that line, but really reading it out in a sort of voice which has got depth, and which is sonorous, and which has got some musicality to it. And of course, in this atmosphere and this rasa of Shanta, whatever, So, I mean, in that sense, you could produce the idea of Vedic chanting through even reciting English poems.
I'm with you. By the way, did you know that Rosalind was a scholar of William Blake? Did you?
No, my God, beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
she's a master of Blake. And
How beautiful.
Funny that you brought that forth.
Yeah, I mean, Blake is beautiful. He's just a stunning poet.
You must have some secret knowledge, some powers. But I just want to say to you, Sriram, is that all your many years with both our teachers, Krishnamacharya and Desikachar, that you have come into this modern life and live in the West has been a great advantage to us, who are trying to understand something of this. And I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for, I mean, there's been a number of incidents where we've been in discussion, and you've said a few just offhand things that have been profoundly helpful to me. I just mentioned one of them was, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, the yogi, commit, I used to say, oh, Arjuna, commit the inhale to the exhale, commit the exhale to the inhale. And I was speaking about this to you, and you said, well, actually, I think the translation of the Sanskrit word is more sacrifice. Sacrifice the inhale. So you said that to me. And this was a few years back, and it was like a light came down. It was like a revelation to me. The nuance of, rather than commit, sacrifice. Give the inhale to the exhale, give the exhale to the inhale. See, so it's some simple meanings like that, an understanding of the offerings from our teachers that have come through you, that have been personally very rewarding to hear this from you. So I just want to, that's just one example. That was a profound and very important teaching that came through you. The word is not commit, the word is sacrifice. So I just want to thank you for that and acknowledge you for what you're doing in this world. And I do believe it is very, very important for this world at this time. And I'd like to just wind up as, like, how do you feel about the pandemics that we're going through, and what is our role as in yoga, as yoga teachers? What's the role of the yoga teachers around the world in this in the panic that humanity is in right now? What do you think?
Well, Mark, yeah, it shows the fragility of human beings, the fragility of societies which are very powerful, very rich, armed to the teeth, and having enough resources to feed millions and millions of people more than there are in this world. So even these very, very sort of powerful, well-established nations in the world are so fragile when it comes to this pandemic, and so many individual lives also in all these nations. So I think for us, on the whole, to understand a little more about the fragility of our existence, whether we are living in a rich country like Germany or New Zealand or the US or in a poorer country like India or in Uganda. I think it's very important to understand the fragility of life. That's part of yoga, of course, very much. To sort of be appreciative about life, to sort of be thankful about life, and also to value it and to sort of make a few right decisions, and at the same time not to get too attached to it because it's fragile. That's one thing. And the other thing is, see, this pandemic is a major problem, I believe, but all the same, we are having much more major problems to tackle. It's the loss of diversity of life, or in terms of nature diversity, the warming up of the earth, the increase of racism, this and fundamentalism, and the amount of weapons being manufactured day by day, second by second, in all these huge factories all over the world. I mean, these are the real problems of the world and not the pandemic, really. And I don't know which political powers will be ever ready to tackle it, and not willing to tackle it. So I think it's time to reflect about this very much. And I mean, we see now during this pandemic that there are concerted efforts are possible, and concerted efforts will be done if there is enough fear and enough feeling of emergency. But this feeling of emergency is not there at all, and I don't think the pandemic deserves the same amount of feeling of emergency as some of these other issues do. And in that sense, I'm a little different. I have a different opinion about the subject of pandemic and the way it's being handled. Yeah. On the other hand, I'm also a sort of very strong, what do you call, spokesman or spokesperson of alternative healing methods, of awakening the inner healer. So I'm a little worried that the reaction to this pandemic is going to subsume this entire subject of self-healing and alternative healing. So we have to be on the alert and make sure that alternative healing methods, apart from the conventional modern healing methods, also continue to remain strong and hold on to their domains.
I hear you on that. And in terms of individuals right now in their fear, maybe in lockdown in their homes and restricted in many ways, economically and socially. I just want to report that one friend of yours that I had the privilege to teach, she began our online course, and I had never met her, and she began to practice, and she said that she had been feeling frightened in lockdown with 2 little children, and she began to practice, and suddenly she felt her home became a sanctuary rather than a prison, and she felt better in her skin in her home. And
beautiful.
Yeah, so I think there's, I wish that we could reach the whole world. That would be a dream. But in the meantime, as many as individuals that we can reach, to help them come home to their own breath, their own body, to their own life, to their own home, to their own garden, perhaps. This is helpful in the meantime, in the midst of the public traumas that are going on and the very real threats that are there. So I'm hoping that what you hold will spread throughout Europe rapidly.
That's a very beautiful thought, Mark, that you use this time to get home to yourself, into your own home, your own breath. That's a very beautiful thought. Actually, if we can share that through yoga, then we have done a good, then you have served a very decent and very significant role with yoga during this pandemic. And if we can give something to mitigate the fears which people have, it's great. And the less fear we have, I'm sure the better we are equipped to fight viral disease.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a very major thing which we could contribute towards.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Sriram, for being such an impeccable student of our teacher, Desikachar and Krishnamacharya, and being such a wonderful yoga teacher yourself, and giving your whole life to this communication and to the world. So thank you so much. And I want to congratulate you on your lifelong relationship with Anjali. And I want to thank Anjali for bringing her book out, her life story. And I'm hoping that we are going to have it in English in due course so that we can all read it. I'm very excited. What is the title of her book?
As We Save the World.
Oh, there you go.
The title was set long before the pandemic came in.
Well, really, that's very excited to read Anjali's book. And that you have a children's book on yoga that I'm very keen to translate into English, because it's a very important book, a very important contribution to the subject of yoga. And thank you for all the publications that you've brought forth. Your work on Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it's a great work, and it's a great guru parampara. And yoga is universal; it's for everybody, as you pointed out. And I'm very grateful to know you and learn from you. Thank you so much.
Mark, thank you very much. I'm very, very indebted to Desikachar and of course to Krishnamacharya too, for all that I've learned from them. It's sort of, I cannot sort of ever pay it back, so to say. But I must say I'm also extremely thankful for all these people who have been sort of, part of my way and part of my yoga teaching times. And for instance, that you sort of being such a good well-wisher, for me, it's a very, very big, it's a very big factor that I have well-wishers like you. And I thank you very much. And it's not, of course, for the very fact that you are a well-wisher, but also the fact that you are carrying the message of yoga in such a beautiful way all across the world, and especially bringing home these very simple messages, which were also very dear to our teachers, like dealing with the breath, trying to understand relationships, staying simple, staying with the feet on the floor. I'm very glad that you're doing this wonderful work also and spreading this knowledge. So,
yeah, well, you do
as Guru Bhai, so to say,
Guru Bhai.
I wish you also all the best and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sriram.